Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Daily podcast on the second day's play in the India-England test from Dharamshala. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today is the Wisden India editor, Aadya Sharma. We'll kick off with a quick roundup of the day. India were totally dominant in the first session. Rohit and Gill put on 129 runs in quick time, both reaching three figures for the second time each this series. England had a few moments in the day, chiefly Ben Stokes striking with his first delivery back bowling since the Lord's Ashes test 251 days ago, bowling Rohit with an absolute beauty that nipped away late and took out his off stump. Anderson struck soon after with one that came back into Gill. England had an opening. The only snag was that India were 60 runs in front with 7 wickets in hand by that point. Debutant Padikkal and Sarfaraz Khan then took the game even further away from England, putting on just under 100 in quick time with both past 50. Bashir and Hartley found some joy after tea, with India sort of collapsing from 376 for 3 to 428 for 8, but England couldn't find a way through the resolute defences of Kuldeep Yadav and Jasprit Bumrah, another sign that this pitch is still and always has been very good for batting. India reached the close on 473 for 8, a whopping 255 runs ahead of England. Aadya, another very handy day for India. Before the test match, Ben Stokes said, "We've not been pushovers like many other teams have looked when they've come over here," which is broadly fair. They've been in with a sniff at most points during the first 4 test matches, but they've been thoroughly outplayed here, none more so than in that opening session where it was one-way traffic.
Yeah, absolutely. It seemed like a different Shubman Gill on show. His IPL preparation has begun, it seems like. But honestly, given how he was earlier in the series to now, there's a stark difference in how he's approaching the spinners. It's a clearer mind. He's, stepping out more. He's sweeping them. There's a big stride out. So that's a big change in Gill. And there's a clear plan to sort of take on Anderson. You could see that in the first session how he how he took him on, and he wasn't afraid of attacking him before the ball could reverse. So yeah, it was great to see. It was great to see this Shubman Gill, because there's been a lot of conversations about how he plays with hard hands, how he might not be fit for Test cricket, but I think in these conditions he's still pretty good.
Yeah, I think there's almost a comparison to be made with Zach Crawley. Both of those guys are clearly very talented. Gill obviously has done a lot in international cricket, albeit not necessarily in Test cricket before, and it feels like Gill's found his confidence as this series has gone on. It felt in the first test in particular that he didn't really, he's got the shots because you've seen him do it in other formats, but he wasn't that comfortable playing them, and he sort of let England's bowlers settle in on a good length, whereas today and across this innings, he very much didn't let that happen, and England paid the price really for not being able to get him early. Some great shots today off both the spinners and the seamers. What do you make of England's performance with the ball? How do you think the spinners went, particularly in the first half of the day? I know they took wickets in the evening session, but really struggled early on.
It's sort of like how it is sometimes when India's bowling, it seems like everything is turning sharply. When India's batting, it seems like an easy batting pitch. Hartley, I feel, was more accurate than Bashir in the first session, but Bashir did slow down his speeds in the second one, so that there was more turn, there was more drift. But yeah, I think by the time they made an impact, India were quite ahead. But I think that's sort of what happens in a long series like this for someone like Hartley and Bashir to spend as much time as they did. They haven't probably bowled as much on these pitches, obviously, but you get used to those conditions more. You understand, what you should be doing more of, and I think that this learning curve has been huge for them this time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they wouldn't have bowled that many spells like they've done during the series in their professional career. But also, I wonder as well that the hope was that these England's bowlers would sort of grow as the series progressed, and they have in some ways, but also I felt like India have grown in how to counteract them. I think arguably India showed them too much respect earlier in the series, sort of let them do what they wanted to do, whereas there was more of a concerted effort to put them off their length early. You saw how Bashir was attacked straight up by Yas Rana yesterday. There were a couple of moments that were similar to that today. And yeah, you're right to say that at the end of these tours, it can be really difficult. You know, English cricket is full of examples in the last 15 years of really difficult last test matches overseas, especially in 5 test series. You know, you remember the 2016 Chennai test match where Karun Nair scores 300 and it looked like India would never stop batting. You got final Ashes test matches, you know, the one in Hobart a couple of years ago where it sort of felt like England were weirdly in the game, but just had such a feeble effort in the run chase. And similarly, you know, Sydney going back further, England had some pretty tough final Ashes test matches in the 5th test. So yeah, to you know, these guys haven't gone through it before.
Yeah, so you know, it happens, the two teams there, you sort of try to compare the spinners, but there's no comparison really. You know, India have kept out someone who was running through the team 3 years ago. So the spin attack obviously can't be compared, but it's still good to see how both Hartley and Bashir have progressed. Even Rehan Ahmed, you could see how he can grow to become, but also, I also want to understand from you how difficult it can be for an English spinner to survive in the test team, because, you know, you also have Jack Leach who's not playing. And if you've got a spot for one spinner, probably in the summer, you'll have questions over how many of, you know, from them, which one to choose.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think something that people listening or watching this outside England may not appreciate massively is just how difficult it is to be a spinner in England. So the county championship has 14 rounds. This year in 2024, 7 of them are going to be in April and May, where the temperatures are generally not that warm. And another 3, maybe even 4 will be in September, again, when temperatures aren't that warm. The other thing is, so basically pitches don't turn that much. The other factor is that in England we use the Duke's ball that basically swings throughout the entirety of an innings. So a lot of teams just don't play spinners, especially those who don't bat. So if you look at the 2021 tour of India, England took a group of young spinners, Mason Crane, Dom Bess, Amar Verdi, Matt Parkinson. Those guys, for various reasons, barely played last year. Mason Crane has gone on loan to Glamorgan. I think he's played 2 games of championship cricket in the last 2 years. Both of them have been at the start of the season where spinners don't really do much. So when England were picking a squad here, there weren't that many spinners to choose from. Very, very few spinners actually command a place in an 11 in county cricket. And I think the selectors deserve a fair bit of credit, actually, for identifying from very little cricket that Bashir in particular had something to work with. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. We had a question in on who we think might be England's number 1 spinner at the start of the English summer next year. That was a question from Mohsin, who said, who do you think will be the lone spinner in the summer? I think there's a case to be made for all 4 spinners who've bowled for England across the series. I still think, though, that the fields that Stokes wants his spinner to bowl to, Jack Leach is the best bowler for that, simply because he's the most accurate. He might not necessarily be the most eye-catching on a final day. He's not necessarily the most likely to rip through a team, but Stokes has had some success bowling really quite attacking fields with Leach. And to be able to deploy attacking fields, you need to be really accurate. And there have been times this series with Hartley and Bashir where Stokes has tried those fields and it's not really worked because those guys don't have that accuracy. But equally, I think the prospect of, you know, Rehan Ahmed playing home test matches when if spinners aren't doing much and you've got Roots off spin and Stokes is back bowling again, then you're sort of wondering what is the purpose of having a spinner in the side. And actually you might want the wrist spinner who's a bit of a X factor option more than someone who's dependable and who will get through a lot of overs. So I think there's a case for all of them, really. I guess I'll throw it back to you. What's your impression been of these guys? You know, how do you think, because I wonder how this series will be remembered from an Indian point of view. A lot of runs for a lot of guys who are quite new to Test cricket. Will there almost be an asterisk against this series, but given how inexperienced the England spinners are, these guys, even though they've done well, might not necessarily play that much in the near future, given you've got Kohli, Rahul, and Pant potentially coming back before that massive series against Australia in a year's time.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be an asterisk next to it, because India, this isn't obviously India's first choice 11. So, there were a few uncertainties for India also. There were a few new players coming in as well. On paper, yes, it seemed like the English spin attack wasn't as threatening probably, but you should also probably give credit to them to some part for having evolved through the series. It's not easy coming up against a spin attack that has Ashwin, Jadeja, and Kuldeep. But there have been moments where they've held their own. They've really turned matches to a certain degree. So yeah, I don't think there's going to be an asterisk really, but yeah, it's also a question that's asked a lot within the Indian circles as to is this the best the England can offer in terms of their spinners?
No, I mean it's a good question. I think a lot of people watching this will probably ask, should England have picked a spinner when Leach and Ahmed left the series? Both Hartley and Bashir looked knackered at points, and they've done well at various stages of the series, but I think they've not left them much leeway really. There's a lot of chat about Liam Dawson before the series. He wasn't picked. I don't think he was necessarily the answer. I don't think the series scoreline necessarily changes if Liam Dawson is in the squad. But similarly, Liam Dawson hasn't played a game of cricket since February the 15th. He's been in various franchise competitions and he's not playing at the moment. And I know that not many spinners play in the county championship, but Liam Dawson was by far the number one English spinner last year. So it feels like a shame for him not to have gotten a go during this series. Maybe they don't really view him as someone who's a long-term option in the future. But I think I think they've broadly done well, the English spinners, but that's for a group who are hugely inexperienced. Anyway, that's it for part one. In part two, we will talk a little bit about Padikkal and Sarfaraz and a little bit about the pitch. Aadya, you sort of alluded to it, but Devdutt Padikkal on debut scored a half century, as did Sarfaraz Khan, his third in 3 test matches. Quite a few new India players have done well this series. And, these guys aren't necessarily guaranteed to play that much, given of the guys who return. So what have you made of Padikkal's first taste of test cricket?
Yeah, I think he was a little nervous, a little edgy at the start, a couple of outside edges to the boundary, but he did look the part. He scored, he hit the cover drives that he's known for in domestic cricket. It's been a couple of challenging years for him. He got COVID and then there were a few stomach related issues that pushed him back in contention, but he scored a good number of runs in the lead up to this, and it's a reflection of how India's domestic structure works, how the India A structure works, that really provides a feeder system for players to get ready before they actually play test cricket.
And it's worth saying on the India A setup that, obviously lots of countries have a second string setup, but India A, they probably play more than anywhere else, but they also put more weight than any other country on performances there. So you can almost telegraph who's next based on performances at A level more than any other country.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think from Jan or Feb 2017 to the end of 2019, the India A team played about 26 unofficial tests. That was more than, the number of tests that some of the test playing nations actually play, teams like New Zealand, West Indies. And obviously after the pandemic, there was a dip. There haven't been as many. There have been 15 since the start of 2020. But there's been a clear-cut plan that for test cricket, we will look at obviously Ranji performances, but more than that, we'll also have a look at how you do at India A, because there's a clear gulf between what the level is at Ranji Trophy, at Duleep Trophy, Rani Cup, the red ball domestic tournaments. And, that transition requires another layer that has been built over the years with India A. So you see that in how Rajat Patidar was picked how Sarfaraz Khan had to wait for his chances, and once he hit, uh, that 100 recently, he was inducted in, and how Padikkal uh, has been, performing so for him to get in. It's like, you might not remember Padikkal played a couple of T20Is. So he was around that contention, but to really push through test level, and now there was space to actually get in a few players. The India A level obviously was very important as a criteria for selection.
No, Sarfaraz is quite an interesting case because he averaged, a million in Ranji Trophy cricket, but didn't play because his record for India A wasn't that good. And, Patidar overtook him because Patidar scored runs for India A straight away. And it wasn't until Sarfaraz scored 100 did he get the senior call up. Sarfaraz, by the way, is quickly becoming my favourite player. He's so fun to watch. He's got a very unique style, and he played because he was brilliant against spin in the third test of the series on debut, but I thought it was quite telling how good he was against Wood today. He played 3 amazing shots against Wood, one sort of ramp over the slits for 4, one pull shot for 6 over mid-wicket, and there's one quite full ball that he sort of rocked back to and pumped Wood over his head. So with that Australia tour coming up, and some guys who've done well recently definitely won't be in 11, may not even be on the plane. I think it was actually a very important passage of play for Sarfaraz to show that he can score runs against fast bowling, which is always, the question for a new player when they get to international level. On the pitch, I was thinking that in the county championship in April, when temperatures are quite similar to what it's been at the moment out in Dharamshala, sometimes you get pitches that are quite similar to this, minus the turn, where it can actually be quite difficult to create wicket-taking opportunities, as there's just not that much energy off the pitch. So I always think that run scoring in April, and the stats bear this out, is never quite as low as people think. You get the odd pudding, you get the odd pitch that is particularly low scoring, but actually you get quite a few games that sort of peter out and don't come that close to a result, even if there's not rain. And this sort of reminded me of that. There's not that much energy. And, we're talking here about how England did today, how the spinners did today, how these batters did today. Really, the damage was done yesterday for England. This was I think England was sort of fine today, but the damage was done yesterday. It isn't a 218 all-out pitch, really. That's why India is so far ahead. And, I guess the one saving grace for England is the pitch still looks pretty good. They're going to get to bat on it for most of tomorrow. Or at least they have the opportunity to. So they've got the opportunity. Obviously, they're miles behind in the game, but they've got the opportunity to actually show what they're capable of with the bat, which they actually haven't done really as a unit at any point really this series.
Yeah. No, you're right. It was actually surprising to see, England lose 10 wickets to spinners on the first day of a test. But it also shows the quality of spinners India has. Obviously, England's middle order, there's been quite a few questions on how they fared. But Kuldeep saying that at the end of the day, I think he said you don't need a lot of variations really. I think I bowled my wrong gun about 6 or 7 times through the whole day. I think he
got 3 wickets. I think he got 3 wickets with those 6 or 7 balls.
Yeah. And he said something about that. I know Ollie Pope steps out, to get runs. So that wasn't the plan. So it's just about having that level of talent, and then having done that level of research that someone like Dhruv Jurel, who's just a rookie keeper, he can tell you that, okay, Pope's gonna step out of the crease next, bowl your wrong gun. So yeah, it was pretty surprising to see England lose the way they did on the first day. But they really would take some inspiration probably from how they fared in the first test to get back into the game.
It was a great moment when Stokes came on for his first bowl in a competitive game since the second Ashes test 251 days ago, straight after lunch, and then bowls maybe the delivery of the test match, sort of reverse swinging away from Rohit seeing it like a beach ball, and can't get anywhere near it. The sort of classic Stokes.
I was so surprised. I mean, when I saw the wicket, I thought the ball was much slower than it actually was shown. It was about 133, because it felt like it stopped on the pitch in a way and just like zooted out and just took the off stump out. But yeah, quite a magic ball.
This is what I mean about the slowness of the pitch. I think it's quite difficult to create wicket-taking opportunities as a seamer. It does. I thought Stokes' bowling does make you wonder, and I know a few people did talk about this during the World Cup. Given how early England got knocked out of the tournament and Stokes stayed when his knee was clearly in a lot of trouble, could he have left the tournament and had that operation earlier? Could he have been bowling earlier in this series when the series was still alive? Go back one test and it's 2-1. It's 2-1 going into the fourth test match. If Stokes is available to bowl, it just gives you more options as a side. Obviously England went down that route, and Stokes didn't really entertain the possibility of leaving his mates out there when the going was tough. But yeah, I wonder if a conversation could have been had there. Anderson bowled a beauty as well, wicket 699 in his Test career. A couple of overs later to Gill with one that reversed in rather than away. And that's actually another point worth making on the county championship pitches comparison, is that in the county championship, as I said earlier, it always swings, whereas here the SG ball doesn't swing for as long as the Duke's ball does, and also because of how lush the outfield is out in Dharamshala, that the reverse swing only came much, much later than at any point we've seen so far in the series. Sometimes Bumrah's been getting the ball to reverse from like over 20, and England have as well at times. But on this occasion, England couldn't really get it reversing until much, much later in the contest. Chris asks, Mark Wood hasn't really offered England much control or wicket-taking ability during the series. What's gone wrong? I really hope that after the Ashes, he could almost be the leader of the attack. I don't know what you thought, Aadya, but I sort of thought that he was expensive today. Sarfaraz took a liking to him, but I'd say that's the only time that's happened this series, really. I think he's looked good and been reasonably threatening without taking many wickets. He took a fourfer in the I think it was a third test. It was at Rajkot, and it's his only 4 wickets in the series so far. And he had a lot of joy bowling a slightly fuller length. And I do wonder if England, with Wood, resort to the short ball too early. I think only 1 wicket of his this series has been a proper short ball, and even then it was quite a tame dismissal for Rohit when Rohit was already on 100. But yeah, I think otherwise he's been broadly fine. Other than Bumrah really, and that one Akash Deep spell, Seamers haven't really had a lot of joy this series. And actually, if you look at the tests that Wood has played, he's probably played the 3 test matches where Seamers have found it most difficult.
Yeah, and you can't even expect him to sort of run through sides, given that's going to be more of a spinner's game, except for if you're Bumrah. But yeah, in any sense, you could see those bursts of spells coming in the way, and it was more about putting a dent than actually taking wickets, and he's done well to that in that sense. Probably not as many wickets, but yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll finish today with India still miles in front, probably even further in front than they were at this point yesterday. Tomorrow may well be the final day of the series if it doesn't go too well with England with the bat. Aadya, cheers for your time. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow.